What's an indicator wireless screen adapter? Lines of settings. What's an operation surface? What's a track provision of cycles? What's a communication setting interference? What's a direct lines of panel? What's a core track position location to assist them through navigation? Everything that General says is from where? How is it done? Inside you. You are the projector. Everybody knows what a projector is to projection, right? Everybody's used a projector, right? And you see it on a wall. You're watching a film strip. That's all it is, nothing else. So whatever you do from inside comes in the outline screen. You have inner screen, outer screen, inner space, outer space, inner spectrum, outer spectrum, right? Inner space inside you, right? But you also have foundations of inner space and outer space outside. So this is the inner and outer space, but you also have inner and outer space of you inside. How you portray that is how you identify that through your holographic setting, which is your VR system that's connected all lines of tether in your cities, 7 cities, 12 foundations, and your clockings. You got to get in your platforms of 24, 48, 72, 144 clocking system, right? Now the team's already in the holographic reset calculation line setting psychological to its calculation position, its foundation. Track provisions is knowing exactly how to go through line setting high interference. Everything is done from inside. So anything you do from inside changes everything outside. So the outside is the outer spectrum of you, which is your matrix. And you guys have to understand what that is. Matrix is your outer space. It's a coloration. It's a pathogens, okay, to your systems. How it all comes together. So the inner cycles and the outer cycles of you. Inner rim, inner norm, outer norm. Okay? Inner outlet, outer outlet. In, out, and audio. Now, when you put that together, you understand how to use the inner lines, the outer lines, and the audio lines. And all levels of spectrum, right? Because everything has that through a voice line grid. Everything has a voice line grid that has this position location and setting and all through travels. Okay? So, now we already seen the holographic line screen. Now we're going to have a direct lines of panels in track location system. The test is already based on what you already know through muscle memory. So let's start off the ground centers. Let's start with the black. Start with black line condition setting. The operation cycles. Let's go through the core track center. Operate system locations. Black. All right. Let's go through red. Okay. Let's go through blue. Okay. And let's go through white. Okay. All right. So this is the basic grounds of the holographic setting. All through frame, all through box, all through mainframe. It's all connected to your cortex lines and how you see your syntax location, your codex, into your line position location, your system. It's all connected to your cerebral. It's all connected to your cerebellum. It's all connected to your memory bank. Okay? So it's all about understanding. Let's get into core tractions and division. 1, 2, 3, 4 set locations. Okay? All right, so you see in the lines of communication lines of wires and traffication lines, you have gold line screens and high center interference, overlap sequence and high position locations, high center line communication of its panels and track system, but it has 2 panels in side correlation. Right, starting with the platforms, starting with the grounds, the powers and the atmospheres, right? All right, so it's the panels of communication setting that travels in between, right? So that's why your body is a bandwidth and a mass to its equation, right? So everything has to have panels, inner lights and outer lights, core track provisions. Let's go through line screens. Let's go through 1, 2, lines of panels, line communication interference. Direct lines of paradox, know exactly what it is in traffication. Let's start with that settings. We're going to go through line communication interference and direct signal. Okay, so we go through 2 panels and we work with inside. We work with inside. We don't go outside. We stay within the system, right? That's the structured division lines of platforms of communication. Okay, platforms of communications. Okay, platforms of communications, grounds, powers, and atmospheres. Okay, so Ground setting is all levels of what? The red. Okay, it's the red security line, which is extremely powerful correlation. That's why you have the calculation lines of Pluto, right? And then you have the blue, which is the center core setting. Okay, then you have the white, okay, which is the correlation setting in travel. That's the matrix lines, the outline calculation setting. You put that all together, right? It comes in this directions. Sets communication lines, sets position, location, operation. One center core is centered in center core. And we bring communication lines and cloud line screen in position of center core system that travels in point lines of graph communication, right? So we end up with this interactions. Let's go through line cycles. Setting position of center. And we go into blue, center position location of center. Okay. And then we go into white. White outcasts the correlation setting that protects the calculation streamlines adaptation. Comes out through equation, right? So that's what you work with the grounds, right? Power generators and line screen is all about understanding how to go through the adaptation lines of certification setting and travels, points, lines of graphic communication to system through all line settings, grounds, powers, and apps. Grounds and lines of security, right? So you get ground setting, change communication interference, and position programs, and direct lines of sight. All right, so let's go track line communication to grounds. Ground levels, line conditions settings into 2, 2, 2, track location lines, and direct signals. Now we come to coloration lines of pathogens into all levels. Okay, these are invisible charts in Pluto line communications into point graph communications into security line. Right? So it's a line communication setting. Process line settings, puts all communications. Now you can have truth, but you need false. You don't just work with the truth because that's the inner cycles. The inner cycle has to go through the outer cycle. Inner cycle is spectrum, outer cycle line connection setting, position of program. Calculation lines, light web and dark web, and position of program set location calculation lines. I'm using coloration lines of patterns. Now we're going to go through blue lines and circles and center communication. All right, done through equations, inside calculations. Here's the blue, right? All right. Now in position lines attractions, we split the anomalies in 3 settings, right? 1, 2, 3. Okay, now getting lines to get into a box mainframe that puts lines of communication setting and travel. Okay, now the team has to recognize the coloration lines as long as you understand the ground lines, but you need the black. The black is the silhouette. The black is the space. Okay, the black is the center of space of operation of your inner cycles and outer cycles together. So you're always working with black. Black is your outer space, but it's the outer space inside you. Okay? So everything inside you is space. It's black. What's around you in your position you are creating through your cities, foundations, and your clockings of color. Okay? Which is the spectrum of the matrix. Through the Merkaba tetra region, all different colors, line, communication, type, position. But you have to understand the truth and the position lines. Okay? So truth and the blue is the false. Right? All right, so okay, position line travels, truth. Okay, truth. We've got 3 truths. Okay. And in position of blue lines is track location line settings and travels into false. Okay, truth and false, right? So that's how it works through the line condition setting. So I'm working with the lines of truth. 3 truth lines, okay, which is red, 3 indicators, right? I know it gets complicated, guys, but this is what you have to understand. All right, so line position of 1 and position of 2 and 3 tractions. Crosses line signals. Now we get in position lines of colossal into theta communication. Process calculation lines of graphs. Direct lines modification. This is how you see lines of inhibitors and line positions, program location setting. It gets much easier when you understand what the brain is. The brain needs an indicator, which is a cursor, and that cursor is its mouse. The mouse is its heart that changes correlation setting into computer operation line center, a center coordinates track interference that puts position location alpha, omega, micro, macro, and calculate line setting in all levels of travel. Points, lines of graph communication. All 3 ground levels into 222 track location, right? Very powerful stuff. So once you have a track provision lines and cycles, you reline these communications into 2 lines and 3 setting calculation. All right, direct lines of panel, console communication lines of travels into a flux. How you go in that core settings, right? That's the navigation, that's the console, that's the line position location setting. Process communication lines of 3 settings into line position location of flux in line screen lines of flight navigation. Okay, so This is one operation lines and a command center line interference in position of 3 tractions. Indirect locations of 1 center is 2 panels of operation. Track communication lines of high center interference into 2 panels and 4 track location. Direct lines of modification lines of pi and generation screens. Position lines of power, direct lines on 1 platform, and cross line signals in a 2-line signal in rotation surface and traction. Platforms it's always in box mainframe and position, but you can outline communications, but you have to understand the correlation lines of truth and false narrative, right? Setting lines of communication lines, we set communication to grounds, all right? So we go through the ground lines. Let's go through the red line screen around pi in generation in calculation setting, right? So change communication lines, highest interference, setting blue lines of screens and correlation lines of 2 tractions in 3-line connection. Process communication lines, highest interference, sets an 8-line formation screen. Direct lines of blue, and plasma lines send a high interference into all levels of product settings and travel point lines of graphs. Direct lines communication highest interference, 2 panels, and line direct signals in set location of 4 settings and travel and point lines of graph communication. Process calculation lines, green line center interference. So what I'm doing is setting a holographic grid through a holographic screen through a VR line setting of structure of a city that puts everything in graph communication of a mapping sequence. Position lines of panels, I'm only working with line communication of 3 lines of red and position of 2 lines of blue. Truth and false narrative, right? You always have to have a false narrative because it needs to understand its primary, okay, in position. But don't line signal in position into false narrative. You don't go through a frame line into negative cycle because it changes your connection, your grounds, your powers, and your atmospheres into the VR setting, location truth setting, right? That sets up falsity line wires, communication lines of highest interference, Trojan correlation setting, and track calculation line setting, and position operation service. The position to its graph calculation lines and graph communication setting of files of data always has an antivirus and a virus communication setting to its intelligence information locations that goes in its console with 3 lines of travels. Okay, sets correlation lines at highest interference of 3 settings, 1 position, 2 travels, 4 correlations, and 5 set calculation. So direct lines communication lines, we start up just the basic ground lines, high calculation screen lines, direct lines modification centers. Now we go into the red cycles. Now what I want to do is I'm going to bring up the 2 panels of communication. I'm going to bring this up, but everything else is on standby. So I have the truth and lines of 3, and I got the 2 lines of high center and false, right? So that's the inner spectrum and outer spectrum, inner light and outer light in position location to its positional files of data process calculation. Very complicated stuff, all through navigation. Okay, complicated, right? All right. Outwind cycles is line communications out through box line and mainframe. Put position lines to 2 panels of retraction. Now I can add a 5-line setting in a rotation center, but I got to be very careful. If I'm going through a 5-line screen, I have to go line position a high line communication into 6 now, because now I'm coming into the water containment system of subterranean line screen in consciousness that puts all lines of high position as program in positional lines of operation. Calculation modification line screens. Let's go into Cloak and Dagger and line setting of its program, bringing it out through equation and traction. So this is going to come out through high cycles. All right, it's going to change all communication setting and process calculation. All right. So one thing at a time is to break these things down through binary, transistors, resistors, and light switches, line center locations. But understanding the correlation. Right, ground levels, line conditions of bracket, lines of highest interference to 3 2-track locations, 3 red lines and locations, 2 blues. That's 3 over 2 over pi. That puts position lines of highest interference. 3 truths into 2 lines of all line communication of false. Puts lines of space and operation line cycles and generation screen lines of platform communications coming out through its equation into the VR setting. Right? Isn't that amazing? How that's all set up? All through graph. Okay, all through observation. All through truth, all through false, all through narrative. Isn't that amazing how you see these things through traction? All right. All right, so that's just the 2-line screen, all through red and blue and white. But that's just the basic grounds, how everything comes into its own navigation lines and location of its travel. All right. Getting that position, you also can do that with the human residence. Okay. Through the higher self, the avatar, and the sim, right? 3 ground centers, guys, very basic ground lines. 4 track lines, that's 1 cycle, 2 cycles, and 3 correlation, right? Getting position lines of highest interference comes into red. You have to understand the basic grounds of a hologram, line screen, location of cities, outside of location of patterns, anything through plateau, anything through foundation, anything through clocking, right? Now you have to go through line communication of blue. basic grounds. Always start with the basic grounds, powers and the officers. Okay, setting position of travel lines, 2 point lines of graph, 1 center cross line, overline cross line conditions, setting position of program. Calculate line interference gets complicated because you're adding 3 line cycles and line conditions setting position of power. Directs calculate lines of 1 signal, 2 panels of communication lines of program. Calculation line cross line signals and line position location setting to holographic setting. Setting coordinates line high interference, setting red line cycles, security line division, cross line signals over cross location. Flux capacitor crossing right through line setting, operation lines of surface, track location of system. Set calculation lines, set cross line screens, set lines setting line position, operation line connections. Process calculation line, ground line center interference, ground line signals, and line conditions over line location of space. Process communication line in position to its vessel communication. Boom. Okay, very powerful, isn't it? All through laser track lines. And let's go through platforms of 2 triangles. And we get position lines of 4 setting rotation. Okay, and track location lines of the sun. And communication lines of red. Sets communication waiting on signal. Process communication lines of high center interference, code weaving, code track location of pi and generation. Direct lines, modification lines. Laser track lines of sky lines of sky grids lines, connection system. Ground centers, line condition setting, space anomaly, security line, and blue plasma line setting, rotates the surface, right? Travel point lines of graphs into metric meters, correlation high interference, and position of teleportation vehicle, and line rotation surface interactions. 2 standard course setting high interference, and modification lines of avatars, line conditions of GOD. 2 modification lines of teleportation. 1 here, all 3 line position of the sun. Powerful stuff, isn't it? Now let's split lines anomaly. I'm only staying in line. I'm not even in cloak and dagger yet. Now I'm adding cloak and dagger over cross screens. 2 panels, operation surface. 1 center, 1 operation lines. Platforms in position location centers and 3 track provisions of cycles. Setting 4 track provision lines at calculation. Now direct lines, let's add the green line cycles, overline screen, cross line signals, in line position of 2 panels, operation line calculation setting, and matrix and correlation lines attractions. Direct calculation lines of highest interference. Let's go through orange, overline cross line centers of panels, operate the system, and correlation lines of track location to a system of travel. Setting position lines highest interference. Now we're going to go through outline signal. We're going to over cross location setting, set a default line rotation surface, and platforms of communication of travel. Outline signals, 2 line mechanism line screen highest interference. Okay, these are prototypes in track location lines of provisions and cycles of teleportation units in track location. Ooh-ah. Coming out through equation. Okay, it's coming out. Right, all through equation, right? All through laser grid lines. Okay, but you got to build your inventories. You got to build the coloration. You got to build the pathogens, right? So seeing that all in communication is very powerful stuff, right? It gets more identified when you get into the line condition setting. Puts all lines of communication settings to your inventory, your position, your traffic flow, and track calculation line screens, adaptation lines of surface. Process communication line direct signals. Let's go through go line screens. 2 panels, line rotations. Let's color it in. All right. Lasing cross line screen, adaptation lines of surface location settings of panels. Process communication line, highest interference, and 3 portals. 4 settings of correlation lines of track location. Direct lines, modification lines, 1 cycle, 1 center, 1 operation surface in a Fibonacci. That's right, Fibonacci of gold, not orange, gold. Okay. All right, direct lines of modification lines are orange line, Fibonacci line screen, high center interference, changing gold lines for orange and track location division. Cycle lines, communication lines on orange line screens, direct lines, modification lines, high correlation setting, program lines, direct lines, modification lines, high correlation lines of track interference, high position as program line position location of the system, and all through calculation. That my equation, right? So it's knowing exactly how to kind of get in your color, right, through truth and false narratives. You start with that correlation, right? That's how it becomes this, right? But you understand the ground level. Bracket communication lines at 222. It's all process communication. We're going to break these things out through location settings, breaking these things down, right? You can set a ground line screen, okay? But you got to go in positions all levels into black line screen. A collocation system opens up all levels of crop circles and trash it, okay? And again, you go through blue. You can go through blue. And line conditions red, and calculation lines. There's a holographic line setting, and correlation center cloak and dagger. So it's communication waiting on signals and track locations. Now this is coming out, and this is on standby, right? This is on standby. This is coming out now. Just this, just that. Put it back. All right. So I'm just showing you what you can do when you get a coloration of the pathogens to its matrix, and how to get line division lines and high center interference of 222, 333, 444, 555, 66, line setting high interference of 6, correlation setting to track lines. Anything line position all loads the operation system is all track location in the system. Travel correlation lines are track location lines of high center interference, and position location how to use. The process calculates in lines in position of space, and track location lines and coloration lines of patterns in your holographic cities of 2 panels as set design. All through platforms of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right, so pathogen line screens, high direct signals, put in all communication setting and position of programs. All right, so let's go through 20 line grid. And we're going to go through clocking system line. 20 line grid equals lines of 2 panels and position lines of 4 settings in a 4 track location. 14 line communications and 5 settings. All right, so we're going to get a 4 track provision of lines of 2 cycles and position location of 4 settings and calculation lines of 8 center. Okay, 8 core track lines, the high center interference, and position location of system. Okay, now we take the 5 line screen, sets lines of 8 plus line screen lines of 5, sets correlation lines of high center interference and settings of what and track locations. And travels 8 line cycles equals lines of correlation lines of 5. Now that gets position multiplication screen lines, adaptation lines, high center interference. Sets communication line interference and set position of the calculation line and locations of 13 settings in rotation, surface, and traction. Now, directing lines of position lines of process, puts lines of blue cycles in center core system and travel correlation lines of traction. And then directing lines of correlation lines of red line cycles, line position location of system through operation. Modify the system, calculation lines, bring into the cloak and dagger, clocking system, location centers, and travel. This comes out through equation. Right? See, it's coming out, right? Through spectrum. Inner lines, outer lines, cycles, and communication position. It's programmed. But you can see it coming out, right? So, like I said, it doesn't have to be a time frequency. It could be a volume frequency in a 4/4 channel, or it could be a 14 line screen and a 15 lines of 8 and travels 8 plus lines of 5 equals lines of 13. So you can go into that equation, how 1 plus 1 equals 2. But I'm just showing you how you get the balance of ground lines and high center interference, how 15 of 5 comes in track location of system. I just showed you through correlation. Communicate with the computer of the operation system, know exactly what's doing to the grounds, powers, the amperes, through the security lines of red, through the positional plasma lines of blue, and your invisible line screen high interference of charter waves into the VR system and track location. All through calculations, all through volume. All right. But you have to really understand this. Okay. Really powerful stuff, guys. Okay. All right, so let's get into the calculation setting. You guys got into the atoms, molecules, and cells. Let's get into the protons and neutrons and electrons. Okay, 3-line communication setting program location setting center interference. Okay, protons. All right. Proton is a line setting lines of high center interference into line communication setting position operation service provision. All right, proton. Pro. Okay, break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down. Let's start with that, right? Pro, right? 4 cycles, correlations, okay? Program line center interference is truth. Communication line center and line condition is false. And O line center high track location is true. All right, 3 set location provision, right? Break it down, right? And the equal lines of correlation. You have 1 indicated position. Set correlation lines as center core center and attraction. Okay, so that sets lines 1 cycle, 1 surface, 1 traction, 1 operational line condition set into its position of its program. Sets communication line center interference into all calculation lines. Sets lines all calculations. Split lines phenomenally. Okay, and then we add position locations in all those. Protron, right? Set lines high center interference. Now it's a telecommunication lines of 2 panels and traction. Directs lines of modification lines in the same cycle in line rotations, routers, and line condition setting position of the program. Process communication lines that goes around the cycle and line communication setting position setting location. Now, the connection line high interference has a connection setting to a teleportation set location, right? The operation system neutralizes the core system and powers of lines of generation screen lines and high core centered in a rotation surface in correlation calculation setting of its proton. Hoo-ah, all through equation, right? Bringing through its equation lines, this is a proton, right? I'm showing a correlation setting travels. Let's go with the blue line cycles. Let's bring in a tractification one line setting calculation. Direct lines modification lines. Let's go with the screen lines of measure, correlation lines of traction. And we're bringing out the invisible chart waves and line condition setting positions program. Now it's coming out through equation. See? Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, all through proton, right? All right, so that's position lines of high center interference into all of the truth narrative and false narratives. The coloration lines of path and the location setting, how to inner lines, calculation center, inner spectrum correlations to outer space correlations attractions, and all line division. Okay, all through calculation. Powerful stuff, isn't it? All right, that's through a proton. Now, a calculation setting to electron is basically an electrical line circuit. It's core track interference and battery line setting location system. You put a proton and electron together and fuses its setting, the line condition setting, to all levels of cold infusion and hot infusion. So you put in lines of blue plasma and red plasma together, right? So it combusts the airs and core lines of the altitude line screens, high adaptation, servo location setting, pixelation graph, correlation lines, attractions. So in position locations, let's start off with screen lines, Fibonacci lines, one center, line condition setting, and track location, one way, one going the other way, right? Center core line centers a 2, and position location projections. Projections over line in track location. Okay? Now, center core system is all levels of view that only expands in center correlation lines of center. Process communication line high center puts you line position own calculation lines to your teleportation vehicle in line position, its operation surface and tractions, all through graph calculation. See? Boom. Look at that. See? Always look at it in a 4-line view. Never look at it in a first line view. Okay? So it's important you understand what's going on. All through center operation of view and travel. Okay? Directs lines of zero location sent to a formula location of its volume. Okay? All right. I know it's going to get very complicated, but this is how you get in position location to a proton, what it's using through tractions, and you're bringing this out through equation, right? So it's important you understand how you use the ground lines all through the VRS setting locations, because you work with that, then you come in this line condition setting. Very important to understand this. Okay, truth and false narratives, right? Coloration lines of patterns, using the inner cycles and the outer spectrum of the matrix in position, all through calculation lines into ground centers and line condition setting position operation. All right. Okay. Division lines of cycles in line conditions high center interference. You are basically in control of what you want to do with the atoms and the molecules, right? What do you want the atoms to do? You want them in rooters and circulation rotation? Here's the atom, right? Now, do you want the molecules working around the system in a triangulation split lines of anomaly? Okay, because that's all it does. It's a graph screen. It's a highway screen, okay? So it's like this, right? So what it's doing is coming together and it's creating triangulations. It's coming together, it's creating triangulations. Coming together, it's creating triangulation. That's what a molecule does. Point lines of graphs, you have the atoms and the point lines of center, operation system and travels, and correlation lines of traction. All through graph, right? So now, getting line condition setting to a neuron, okay, is basically neuralizing. Correlation high center interference, graph communication lines, high center interference. Break it down, okay? Break it down in 3 sets or 4-track location, right? All right, so in position locations, RON. You always have to break it down. Neuron, right? All right, so neutralize, correlation lines, unification lines, energy lines, center location setting, in position locations, new track line, position line, 3 cycles. Correlate track and interference of remembering communication setting position, co-location, eye interference, in online cycles, online rotations, eye-line tractions, and direct signals and modification. All through neuron, right? So neuron can be anything, shape, and formation, screen lines, adaptation lines, and surface, but it has to understand this direct signal location setting. So we have an N line and a 2-track revision. That's truth, right? So we break the screen lines. Remember I told you about the 3 lines of 4, 4 lines of 3, split lines, anomalies of 4 equals lines of 3, equals lines of 43. Well, you got 2 position lines of energy lines, in position of 2 lines of unification lines. So that's 2, 4, 6. That's 6 equals lines of pi in tractions and directions, right? Then we go into line condition setting. Where's the graph communications ground centers? 1, 2, and 3 line condition setting 2. That's all levels at its router. Line condition setting 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so 6 equals lines of high center interference of pi, set locations, line centers, / lines, communication lines of 8 in track location, right? So, it's all platitude and division lines, how you correlate the track interference, and the operation line cycles as been split lines only. A track location line. So it's one traction and one positional operation. To calculate this line's high interference, that puts lines of bracket in communication to its position in its program. To calculate the lines at all line center interference, that's 2 track location line centers of 2 panels. So we got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So that's communication lines, a bracket of 10 set location. That's my equation. Right? So this is this. This is this through neuron. So, it's complicated stuff, isn't it? Try to understand the connection setting, how it all works inside your location series systems. Come into the wall dividers and traction. Okay. So all calculate, modify, right? How it comes into the correlations, how it comes into the metric meters, the mind, the awareness. You can do whatever you want to do, right? But you have to understand, you have to be in command of what you want to do. You are controlling your system and all of us, how you see, how you want things done through its atom, through its molecules, right? Because what you're doing is you're taking it out of its own space of time, a mechanism inside your vessel, right? So the atom is taking time and effort to communicate with you, right? So that's what I'm saying. You have to really understand how to provision the cycles and allocations through its calculation line system. Everything in position through all lines, protons, electrons, neutrons, photons, in that position location equal lines of everything through its own geometric operation of its design. And the more you get modification out of that, the more it gets easier inside your vessel communications and what they do for you, right? Okay, so protons, neurons, neutrons, same location setting, same thing in tractions, whatever it means to you, right? So you have to identify if it's intelligence and where it's coming from. Let's go through frame centers. Let's correlate track location system into body fragmentation screen, right? Ground centers, power centers, atmosphere. Plasma line screen high center interference in positional marking system. Correlation lines of setting, torical fields. Pretty simple, right? Track locations, lines, Merkaba, and track location. Whoa. Then we travel through the platforms. Setting position 1, 2, and 3 track locations. All through setting. Process communication line center interference. You come into the sun, you come into the moon, all through its wormhole, all through its portal, all through its communication, and track location lines of travel and calculation. Okay? See? It's a dome. Everything's a dome that you put in, right? All right, you have to be in a dome, and that puts you in a ground lines. What do you think your Earth is in? Your Earth is inside you. It's not outside, it's inside. So you're living in a torical field, you're living in a magnetic field, you're living in an energy field, you're living in the magnetic field, you're living in DX lines of fields. DX lines of correlation setting, dimension lines, correlation lines, X equals lines of X, X position location, 1, 1 tractions, 3 correlation lines of high center interference. Okay, so let's do that again. DX, okay, equals lines of correlation traction centers. Get position of 2X lines, high center interference, that's position location of 10 over 10. Sets communication lines of 1 over 0 into 1 over 0 and track location of travel. Points lines of graph communication solar sails and line rotation surface and travel. Point lines of road graph communication lines of platforms and line rotation surface and traction. Tunnel, right? So we take the DX lines at high interference in position location of half pipe that lines the screen lines, adaptation lines of surface and center core setting. Process calculation 1 indicator position of program. X3000 comes in, travels lines of X, X, 1, 1, 1, and rotation surface and travel. Adds correlation lines of high center interference into 2 panels, cross line signals, line position of its operation surface and travel. DX lines high center interference, center core system, and travel correlation line interference. D line 1 rotation and 2 track set 2 panels. Process communication lines of X line rotation in a 4-line communication setting of program and position location operation. Direct lines is correlation lines of travels, point lines of graph, in position location of Earth and travel. So plat division lines X3000 comes in tractions. Direct lines of docking, 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 and direct lines of docking in one position of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and calculates line settings. Docking its system, sending location of its operation surface and travel. Okay? Getting line height center interference comes in the visible chart waves over cross line calculated setting and operation surface and travel in position navigation setting in truth and false narrative and its applications. All right? So now everything's coming out, right? Because I override the system. When you override the system, you communicate with everything all at once. Everything all at once is coming out because I set up laser grids, I set up power grids, energy line settings, high center interference. I set up line position locations, settings, security line, plasma line, and invisible chart waves and correlation lines of tracking. So everything's coming out in line position to its calculation setting. Puts an override screen and direct case into your system, all through coloration in its VR setting. Hoo-ah. Boom. Done my equation. Yeah. Powerful stuff, isn't it? All right, so I'm just showing you how you take one thing at a time or you take everything all at once. Everything all at once, it comes out. But you have to understand the laser grids, which is your panel line screen, which is you connect to your sky grids and your sky nets. Getting direct lines, grid lines, high center interference, guys, you have to understand your holographic city to anything of communication has to understand the 3 wires of indication, in and out and audio. Everything is in, out, and audio. Okay, everything has an inner exit, everything has an outer exit. So going from one position location right comes line centers to the left, out. Okay, everything comes in, everything comes out. Has to, right? Has to come out, right? So once you understand that, then you understand the volume of vast velocity and acceleration of Mach. How you can take everything out in this VR system all through laser grids and a rain graph calculation. Look how powerful it is. All this is coming out all at once, right? You start out breaking things down, right, in patterns. And this is where it comes in position locations, where you guys really have to understand all levels of this, the graph. How to take things out of the equation, how it's truth, its false narratives, in this matrix, that's that design, okay? Basic grounds, guys, basic grounds. And position of volume, okay? I went through line connection setting. Your processing line connects to your data lines really understands the compute screen. It has the direct lines of panel. This operates all communication to your line sites, high correlation setting to your line condition setting to your cyclism. Direct calculate lines to your inner lines and your outer lines. Okay, you got your inner connection setting, you have your outer line screen. That puts lines of operation system to all your senses, right? So setting that in positions, you come into line settings, how to use that through the atmospheres, in position locations to its hemisphere, stratosphere, bio, and its perineum. Okay, there's a line positions of 5 cycles. You have to understand the core line interference. But you have to understand the holographic cities has to be set up line condition system to understand it through its operation setting. Now, bringing these things out through equation is all through laser communication. Okay, security line, invisible line, and line condition levels of plasma. Puts everything out in correlation lines. I'm communicating with everything all at once now through 5. All through travel, all through platform, all through communication, all through VR, all through all line highest interference in the holographic setting, all through calculation. All right. All right. So in that position locations, the center core system has to understand more levels of you. Now I just show you exactly what you can do through all communication to its position, its program. Everything has a traffic flow, but everything works all together, right? The only thing different is that when you get out of observation and you automatically come in intent, you're changing everything of formation of travel right away. Because as soon as you get intent, who do you think is listening inside your system? Everything that's in an operation. Your atoms, molecules, protons, electrons, neutrons, right? So they never stop the sequence, but they listen to what you're saying. As a core track revision, let's go through coloration line screens. See, you guys have no idea what color your atoms are. You have no idea what your molecules are, what color they are. Okay, it's not what you think they are. And remember, you got to get into the VR. You got to get into the rotation of the VR. You got to get into the center core system of the VR. You have to come into the holographic structure of the VR, colors. In that position locations, atom line, triangulation line condition setting, right? Atom, molecule, okay? Or the track interference line condition setting, proton, track location line settings. That's a proton, okay? Correlation high interference, molecule, indirect signals, and 3 triangles, line position of its position of program. Setting correlation high interference, photon, right? Photo essential location setting, photo line, screen high center interference of image lines, according to tracking interference of probing. Direct lines, calculation lines of plasma, screen lines, adaptation line site, correlation setting, photon. Okay? Process communication. What do you see in settings? We see intelligence. What do you see that through scanning? What's that? The correlation, that's the arm. Locational line. There it is. There's the hand. Boom. Now you see the track location of its intelligence? Everything's information of intelligence, people. Okay, set correlation lines, attractions. There's the feet, right? Or tracking interference is the body. Oh, it's all coming in formation now, right? Then it's position lines of travel, point lines of graph, in a solar sail and track location on a boat. But you actually can see it coming in a line screen, right? This is all calculated modified inside you, right? What they're used for, right? So you are in control of that. They keep doing what they're doing, but they know exactly why they're inside the vessel of itself. You don't need to identify that. You just have to identify that it is its own setting of its own intelligence. It's better to get a better collaboration and partnership once you recognize that, right? And how you see things is how everything is perceived through integration, right? If we get a 40 track provision, okay, so we got a 41 line cycle in position 2 graph point lines of graphs into lines. Wait till we get to 10 and travel. Sets lines, correlation lines, high center, equal lines of communications and setting, 4 line divisions. That's 4 track location, right? Now we get the ground line circle, ground line surface, and line rotation surface to XD1000 in set location. Process communication lines is 0 in position 1 center and travel. Equals line correlation lines going this way, going this way, going this way, going this way, and going this way, and travel. Points, lines, of grids, sex core lines, high interference, electrical grids, electrical panels, electrical interference, high positional location graph. Sex correlation lines, high interference, line communication setting, and travel point lines of graph communication. Direct lines of calculation line, center interference, 1 center core system, 1 travel line, positional location XD1000, in platforms going through the center operation of set calculations, traveling lines into another universal line realm, and a portal communication lines, a high interference, high position program, and set location. Complicated stuff, right? So what do you want to take out through equation? Let's take out the center. Okay, it just comes out through red. See, it comes out. I don't need the blue. I don't need the white because it's already done. But I'm just showing you how this all comes together. When you bring things out, it just comes out, goes back in, right? So it knows its central system, what it is in track locations, right? Illuminate the graph lines, high correlation setting. Colorate the patterns, line connection setting to its operation service. Put process communication high central location setting, all calculated modified through truth and false narratives. All through coloration, right? All through line communication setting. And when you want to work with line communications, it gets a lot more easier how to set up the holographic screen and direct cases how to use your tool sets. Communication ground lines. Let's go through 2 panels. Okay, line position locations. This is the primer. So it's how it's put together. Let's go through track location. Let's start with that. Okay, let's go with this. Okay, let's go with this. Okay, let's cross line signal. Okay, let's operate in a flux line communication downline screen location. Setting line communication of platforms and setting, cross line, 3 strips. Okay, correlation lines interference into 4 strips. Position lines of 5 strips in line centers of 6 in set locations, right? 7 lines, 8 lines of travel. Okay, now what are we working with inside? What's the information panel that I'm giving you instructions? Right here in travel. This is what it is. This is the file I'm giving you guys in a 3 center core. That's what I'm giving you, right? But it has to have its primer, right? So it knows exactly what it's doing through its travel in set position. The operation lines it grounds, its powers, and its atmospheres, its application. There's the file I'm giving you. But it has to have a primer center, right? Process communication lines of files, travels lines of 3 line communication set position of its program. It calculates lines across line signals into data files and position of its position location and setting through operation. Process calculation line screen changes all lines of communication setting of process calculation. Position lines of highest center interference routes the system correlation lines attractions. Now we got files of communication and grounds. Let's get in 2 panels into 4 settings into 6 locations and centers of travel. Okay, very complicated stuff, right? But it's coming into blocking centers of T reception line screens now. Okay, it's getting more complicated. All right. Now, cross lines, we had a 45-line split. Waving cycles of energetic line screen location of dome centers and travel in rotation surface and travel. Points lines the graph communication setting. Adds a coloration lines of screens. Let's color it the black location system. Now, looking through a TV reception, this is what we see through traction. Let's go through red. And zone line centers, high travel point lines of graphs. Color it in. Okay, we'll start with that correlation. That's truth. Okay. Remember, it's all through TV receptor now. It's getting more complicated. Now let's go through blue. Okay, we'll go cross screen in a 4-box location. Rectangle through 4-box locations. All right. Power generation lines, a correlation setting, TV reception lines, and pixelation graph correlation setting. Process communications at all levels. Process data line formation, coloration lines of screen line, adaptation lines of cortex. Sim cortex lines of codecs. Line conditions of data formation, screen lines, and data line communication of setting. Process communication. See the platform? All right, so as a direct line of sight, bring communication lines of data file into 2 atoms of rotation surface. 1 atom, there's another atom rotation surface interaction. 2 atoms, boom, right? Box through center. Change the correlation line, split lines of anomaly, 3 setting correlation lines of split. Direct calculus line and high interference that cross line signals and line communication location of its program. Direct modification lines over cross line center location of red. Cross line center location setting into red and center core center and travel point lines of graph. Molecule, atom. Okay. Travel point lines of graph, set lines of calculation setting over cross line screens, sets of 3-line split lines of anomaly, point lines of high center interference of dockings, and 3-line rotation surface and travel. Travel point lines of graph communication setting. Remember, all this is all through TV. Let's go through the green line cycles. Let's go through center line position and point lines of centers into docking system, cross line signals and panels into 3-line split lines of anomaly and track location. Now I'm just going through color now, through a hologram. This is all through a game and center calculation lines. How to go through modification lines, screen high adaptation lines, the TV set line, pixelation, graph communications. Let's add number sequence, or the track interference location of 0, 0, 0. Platitude lines of 4 zeros on bottom. Okay. Add correlation lines of 0, 0, 0, 0. Add 1-line signal location setting. Process communication ground lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 location settings of travel. Points lines of graph, center core system. Now this comes into a high line centers and line position of location of travel. Points lines of graph communication. Higher levels of high center interference are holographic lines of sharp case setting the holographic communication and position location of the program. Lines and calculation lines of flight navigation lines to escape. Escape lines of 4 zeros and lines of tractions. Direct lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 set locations. Ground centers operation line surface, line condition setting crop circles, and line community high center interference of travel. That's my equation. Boom. See? Hologram. All through that, through a hologram. So, I know it's complicated, right? Very complicated stuff. Now, this is all sequence and files, but this all goes inside your system. What your atoms and molecules and protons, electrons, and photons are doing inside your system. That's what it's doing through schematics. Okay? It's creating travel for you guys. It's that, nothing else. All right, so let's go through configuration screens and direct signals of panels. Let's go through security line division and rotation surface interactions. Coming out through equation. See, this is coming out now. See, just these 2 platforms. Everything's on standby, but this is only coming out in traction. Okay, mega multipass. But look at it. Look how complicated it is. All through structure, all through schematics. That's just how your brain interprets everything. That's how your brain sees everything, and all through platform, all through graph. All through cortex, all through cerebral, all through memory, all through bank, all through communication, all through syntax, all through codecs. Okay, and all calculate modify. Okay? All right, so get in that correlation lines of tractions. We can stand it out. Let's bring it in position. Let's color it the screens and bring in a higher information, right? You know, I'm just going to go through blue plasma line setting and all lines of high center interference of travel point lines and graphs. Bring it up through equation. Now we're going to go through green and center core system and matrix line screen location adaptation. Bring in the green matrix. Okay. All right. Let's bring out the gold. All right. Add gold line cycles, correlation line interference, and vessel communication and positional location of its program. So I'm building. Mass. Layer. Dimension. Third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension, sixth dimension, eighth dimension. How do you want to look? How do you want to see in dimensions of space and time? All through traction, all through hologram, all through schematics. And then we'll go through orange. Let's go through orange. So look at that. Okay. Okay. Get a communication line, interference location lines. Let's go through purple communication lines, green adaptation lines, the server location setting, all office operators location to its vessel communication. Done. Now it's coming out. Now it's coming out. Now it's coming out. Boom. Right? Building mass, volume, velocity, acceleration, Mach, bandwidth, streaming, longitude, latitude. Right? And never see it on this position. Always see it on all lines of communication. Always see it on a 4-line split of anomaly. Always see it. Okay, how you want to see it. How you want to see it like this. You want to see it like this, or you want to see it like that. See, everything comes into frame. Everything comes into frame. And everything comes into frame. Okay, very simple. But always see it on a 4-line setting, all through sublocations. Right? Never see it in a front view line. There's no surface graph. It's all correlation lines of dimensions of space. All volumes, mass, velocity, correlation, right? Very complicated stuff, right? But this is how your brain works. How you determine how you see images, guys. Right? So it's trying to get in position with what you guys are seeing, why you're seeing these things. So get in that position is all of the tracking line position. See? Everything comes out all at once. Okay, and I can just build and bring it out more, right? Okay, let's add more red. Let's add more red, add more red, add more red, right? See, it's coming out more, right? Coming out more, coming out more. But in position, if I'm taking this out, this is on standby. This means this is canceling out. This goes back to its setting, which is back to its own space of time. So I'm only bringing these out, right? One step at a time. Let's go into likeness setting of gold. Let's add the gold line screens, the high adaptation lines of surface. Now it's coming out traction, see? This is coming out. This is on standby. Okay, easy peasy lemon squeezy, guys, right? Yes, please hold your comments. Okay, if you want to go into Q&A, that's totally fine, but it changes all lines of travel and mechanism line screens. Okay, so it's very important. If you have any questions or comments, you leave it for Q&A. Thank you very much. All right, so graph communication lines gets a line communication setting position of its program. Okay, so it's mostly understanding one graph line, one grid line, high center interference, and 3-line split lines of anomaly. Sets communication lines in a 4-track division. Correlation line, split lines of anomaly in a 4-line setting location. Point lines of graph, platforms of 1, platforms of 2, platforms of 3, and platforms of 4 on your highways and track location. Okay, direct calculation lines of the Earth, ethers. Okay, there's the ether lines. Okay, 3-track division, and there's the correlation lines to its umbrella. Okay, sonar interference. Set position travel lines, point lines of graph, 2 satellites, and correlation lines, retractions. Satellite division, sonar line 1, 2, 3, in position of 4. Calculation 1, 2, 3, in position of 5, and 6, and 7, and 8 line setting of travels. Point lines of platforms 1, and platforms of 2, platforms of 3, and magnetic highway line centers of data and process calculation. Direct lines, modification lines, split lines, communication lines. Let's go through the green line cycles. Green line centers and line rotation surface and travel. Let's go through line condition setting into blue, which is a plasma line screen. So what you're doing is you're setting up more lines of formation screen lines, how to see yourself into structure line division in set location. Then you go in position of red. Let's get in that, of course, centers, security line, division line, rotation, surface, and travel. Sets communication lines. Let's go into gold, right? So it's all about breaking these things down, letters, numbers, shapes, and your binaries. Know exactly what's going on in division. Now it comes out through equation, right? So this is coming out. Okay, that's coming out now. See? Oh, just this is coming out. This is on standby, right? So what that does is it cancels everything out and puts everything back into its setting at set location. Because you don't need it, because you're only bringing this out, right? Because you already coordinate the system all through your data highways. That processes the communication of its grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres. Setting track line version of cycles, line conditioning crop circles, line signals rotating, and line position notification, the high standard interference of its program. Okay, all through holographic setting. So, complicated stuff, isn't it? Bringing things out through equation. All through a T reception line. Pixelation graphs, track line positions, but you have to send all calculations of volume. How to do this through truth and false narratives of coloration, right? So that's what it's all based on. I like to see the coloration in setting a truth and false narrative, location of binaries, and understanding how to do it through your formulas and its equation settings in track locations. All right. Binary lines, reset lines, reframe lines, core track interference, sending your communication setting to position of its program. So the more you come into color, the more it gets easier how you see things through tractions. All right. If we get a 5-5 line screen and position locations in 10 cycles, let's get into 13 lines of communications and 6 lines of volume. Okay. Now that puts lines of communications brackets lines of 2 5s. It sets lines, split lines of anomaly, 1 center, singularity. Overcross lines in position, bring in 0 line, 1 line, and 3 lines of binary. Okay, that's the true understanding how you come in that position. Working with the atom lines, what the atom can do in rotation. Working with the molecules, work instruction line, division lines of shapes, and correlation lines, attractions, and direction. Okay, you have to understand why you have this inside correlation, right? And how you come in proton and electron in this application. Proton, electron. There it is. Look at the ship. Let's go to line condition setting. There it is. Oh. Okay. And this is all done through the center of correlation settings of travel. 2 bracket lines of 5s. All right, you change the line communication setting to location of 10 lines. You singularity the communication lines, you add the lines of 0, 1, and 3, bring it together, sets up a binary. Okay, sets up a binary. Okay. All right. So that's what you have to understand how to use your computer operation system, understanding brackets of singularities into binary. Binary comes in line condition setting to 1, 2, 3, and 4 track provisions in 3 cycles, and 2 line settings in 1 center. Okay, complicated stuff. What is that in position? There's the pyramid. Whoa, look at that. Boom. Okay, and that's all through 0 lines. So you got a 4 track provision, 1, 2, 3, and 4 platforms. And you got 3 lines, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and you got split lines of a flux in position to B equals lines of correlation lines, operation system, and travel correlation. Okay, there it is. Boom, right? Calculation ground centers, operation surface, and travel point lines at graph center. Process communication lines has a box center that rotates the system location of data formation screens. The operation system overrides the cross-line calculation setting and data formation lines application. Process communication electrical line, screen lines of adaptation lines of security, and panels of operation files. Complicated stuff, okay? Complication is good because it gets you a better understanding how to communicate, understand how to vortex, how to understand the telewaving, telecommunication, telegraphing, anything the code weaving, code activation, screen location setting into routers, line condition setting to your theta communication, or your H-line screens, or your E-line rotation, or your A-line setting into remembering communication of its awareness and traction. Okay? What is that line communications of in travel? E, A, R, T, H, your Earth. Process communication lines of E, communication lines of A, put in all connection high center interference anagram, put in the line communication like the crossword puzzle, putting positional lines of programs, right? Correlation lines of R, calculation lines of high center interference of T, and correlation settings of H. Earth line rotation grounds, operation surface, and rotation balance is that calculation. Right? Scrambling line condition settings in process calculation. Okay? So getting at positions, but you have to come into lines of singularity to binary, guys. Okay? So that's the true understanding, right? So you have to understand what the equal sign is. Very simple what the equal line is. It's just the platform. They go through the transits. Okay? It's divots, right? It's like this. Divots, 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 divots. This is what we see a data screen on a computer. It's just divots, 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 divots. That's on a computer, right? But it's a platform. See, that's what they don't recognize. It's a platform you travel through. Then you walk through a dimensional door, right? So, and then you go through higher levels of platforms. Foundations are levels into your settings and your clockings. That's all it is, nothing else, right? So provision lines of cycles, you have your center core, this is system of U. You go through 3 travel line condition setting, go through all levels. traveling through. So you started through platform. Now you're in position of flying through your wings. Boom. You go from here. Now you're levitating in your UFO. Boom. Zigzag, zigzag, line, center line interference, F through equation. Boom. Okay. That's the process you all have to come into, right? Understanding that through the inner position location that travels, point lines of graph communication setting to its operation surface and travel communication to its position of its program in its VR system. All right. That's it. Hope you guys enjoyed that. See you in 5.